Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to another edition of 18 Minutes with 180 Markets. And, we always talk about, it's so important to be in the right sectors, and medicine and medical technology, we're certainly in a golden age of medicine. And one of the leading companies on the cutting edge of non-radioactive treatment is Imagion Biosystems, ticker IBX. And we're very fortunate to have with us today Bob Prue, Managing Director, all the way from San Diego. And for those of you that don't know, not only does San Diego have arguably the best weather in the world, but it's also a leading medical technology hub. And with that introduction, Bob, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks for the invitation. Great to be here.
Awesome. Hey, Bob, maybe, the best place to start, I think, is just to give us a little bit about, your background and, and that journey that led you to IBX.
Yeah. So I'm probably now 30 plus years in the life science and medical device diagnostic space. I started early in my career in a marketing role, helping design and develop software, back in the early 1980s when the PC was just coming out, helping to automate analytical aspects of life science tools, types of products. And so most of my career has been on the commercial side of things, marketing, sales, business development, trying to identify new markets and new products, and then helping to establish the commercial route for those. I've had the great fortune to be involved in a lot of pretty cool, innovative technologies over the years. But I'll say that the Imagion Biosystems technology is probably the most impactful thing I've had the chance to work on. So lots of times you get a chance to work on something that's maybe really interesting and good technology for laboratory medicines. But this is the first thing where I'm really going to be able to see that we can directly impact patients.
Fantastic. And specifically, obviously, one of the big areas of focus is cancer for your product, and notwithstanding COVID-19 and how horrific it is, the reality is that cancer has been a far bigger issue over the last 100 years plus. Can you just talk a little bit about maybe the size of the addressable market and how that fits in with IBX?
Yeah, so on a global basis right now, we spend about $100 billion a year annually just to try to diagnose cancer. And that comes from everything from imaging methods to biopsies and pathology and microscopy and looking at tissue samples. So, the problem we have is pretty much what you just said, which is we know cancer continues to be a growing problem. So despite spending $100 billion a year, we would argue we're not doing a very good job of being able to really get to that. About 60 billion of that 100 billion is in imaging alone. And so, we look at that as an opportunity that if we can improve on our ability to diagnose and detect cancer at an earlier stage, will have a positive impact on the treatment then, because all the data are very clear that the earlier you diagnose and identify the presence, the better the treatments are. Treatment outcomes always improve.
Right, and that is, so early detection is probably like the one issue. If you could solve that, you'll solve 100 issues downstream, if you will.
Yeah, because part of the problem with cancer is that it's really good at building up defenses. So the problem is by the time cancer gets to stage 3 or stage 4, it's built up significant defenses. And now we're trying to treat a well-defended, if you will, disease problem. If we can get it early at stage 1 or stage 2, before it started to build up its fortress or its defenses, we have a better chance that the treatments will have better outcomes. So our goal is to try to identify not only improve detection mechanisms in general by using non-radioactivity, but possibly get to earlier detection so that we can improve outcomes.
Right, and that just leads us downstream to, the issue with non-radioactive treatment, because we all know that excessive imaging with a lot of radiation could lead to problems. And IBX, seems to have, the early stages of a solution to that. Can you discuss that a little bit more?
Yeah, so today there's basically 5 ways to image the body: MRI, CT, PET, ultrasound, and X-ray. And of those, PET, CT, and X-rays all use some form of radioactivity. right? So we've got 3 of the 5 ways that we currently image the body using a radioactive mechanism to try to do imaging approaches. MR and ultrasound don't use radioactivity. So really, while they're all very good imaging methods and they do different things differently a little bit, obviously X-rays are great for identifying broken bones, but not very good at identifying soft tissue problems, for example. But the real goal would be to come up with a mechanism by which we get the same kind of sensitivity that we would get from a radioactive detection method, but using a non-radioactive approach. And that's really what we've managed to develop here.
Right, and is that your MagSense technology, if you will?
Yeah, that's the basis of the MagSense technology.
Right, and can you explain, and forgive us, we're not all doctors, for laymen, if you will, how the technology works?
Yeah.
From a high level.
Yeah, sure. So the basic concept of the MagSense technology is that we use a magnetic particle, a very tiny nanoparticle, magnetic nanoparticle. So these particles are about 1/1000th the size of a cell. So they're really tiny particles. They're made of what's known as iron oxide, a magnetizable product. The iron oxide is biologically safe because when it gets metabolized by your body in the liver, it gets broken down into ferritin. And ferritin is the molecule on your hemoglobin that helps carry oxygen in your blood. So the component that we use that's the magnetizable component of our technology is biologically something that your body is used to receiving anyways, unlike a radioactive tracer. All right, so we use these tiny particles, and they have a very unique property in that they only generate a magnetic signature if they become stuck to the tumor cells. If I administer our particles to a patient and the patient doesn't have the tumor, the particles will harmlessly circulate, they won't generate a magnetic signature, and they'll be taken to the liver and metabolized into your ferritin. If you do have the tumor that we're looking for, then the particles will become attached. And when they become attached, they act like a magnetic beacon that's detectable by our technology.
Amazing. And this, for all the viewers that were lost in the details, this was deemed to be a breakthrough device by the FDA. Is that accurate? That's
correct. So the FDA looked at that and said, gee, if this really does what you say it will do, this will be a breakthrough for a diagnosis, because a non-radioactive way to have the same specificity that you would get from pathology and that level of sensitivity doesn't exist today. So that's where they said, right, if this does what you're claiming it's capable of doing, it will be, it will meet an unmet need today, because we'll finally be able to get the accuracy or specificity in an in vivo image-based approach.
Excellent. And where do you stand from a timing point of view with various approvals from various world bodies, I would say?
Yeah, so we've taken the approach primarily that we're looking at our first 2 possible points of entry as being the United States and Australia. And there's reasons for going after both of those. And so we've been in the process of trying to get into what's known as first in human, or our first clinical testing, later this year. So we've done all the preclinical work for our first product for HER2 breast cancer in terms of animal studies, safety and toxicology testing, pilot production, et cetera. And so we're gearing up right now in 2020 to try to enter into the clinic for a small first proof of principle, or first in human study later this year.
Okay, that's great. And then I assume once you get some results, you publish them and put them out to the market and so forth. And there's a commentary period.
Yes, exactly. So we'll be able to publish relatively quickly on our initial work, and then we'll use that to then decide, do we press forward immediately and start to work on a full pivotal study that would go for regulatory submission? Do we have some additional work that we need to do to try to improve sensitivity? But we really felt that from an investor perspective, we needed to take one more intermediate step and de-risk the technology before spending all the money to do a full pivotal study. So this first in human study is a relatively small study that will just give us that sort of, I'll say, finger in the wind assessment that in fact we're on the right track and it's worth, we need to pursue further now clinical submission. Right.
So we know that there's a huge addressable market in terms of cancer, and probably even, some, further uses we're not even discussing, because it seems like there's an MRI clinic every other block here in Melbourne. But can you just talk about the economics of IBX, down the track? I mean, I consider you have somewhat of like what I call it the razor blade model, where you have a fixed component and then a reusable component. Can you just discuss that a little bit with the audience?
Yeah, so that intellectual property that we have on this method of detection, so what I described earlier about the magnetic property of the particle only being detectable if they become bound to the tumor cell, that's really what our IP for the company is about. And what's nice about that is that those patents protect both the measuring instrument and the consumable or the injectable component, because if you're going to use this technique of the magnetic property of the particle, then our patent protects both the instrument that would do that measurement and the injectable component, right? So we've got the razor and the razor blade, or the printer ink business model, as you suggest. So the real trick to this then from a monetizing perspective is, in our view, is that we want to partner with one of the leading medical imaging companies to help us with the instrument piece of this, right? There are 40 companies that are already experts in making, selling, and servicing capital equipment in the imaging market, right? We don't need to become another expert in that. So our ideal relationship would be finding someone, one of the imaging companies, that would be interested in partnering with us to help commercialize the instrumentation, and then we continue to develop the different nanoparticle formulations for breast cancer, prostate cancer, ovarian cancer, et cetera. And we work with them from a commercial perspective, either through royalties or a revenue share, for example, on the consumable.
Right, and that's, I noticed this week's announcement with Siemens is something like that, maybe where it would, obviously very early days, but that would lead there, or a General Electric or someone like that.
So that's exactly right. We've said all along that that this partnering approach is, we think is the right commercial strategy, and often ask, well, when do you think something like that might happen? And what we've said all along is that the closer we get to first in human testing, and the more risk we've taken out of the technology, the more likely it is that we could attract a commercial partner. And so this collaboration that we just announced this week with Siemens is sort of that first foot in the door of giving them visibility to what we're doing. It's a no financial arrangement where they're going to provide contribution in kind of expertise, and we're going to do our work. But it gives them visibility to what we're doing, and may lead to a bigger relationship. But certainly, minimally, it leads us to get into the clinic and establish the data that we need. But I would say, Siemens, GE, Toshiba, Hitachi, I mean, you can name a whole bunch of companies that are large companies in this space that would all be prospectively interested in a new breakthrough technology that does something that MRI or PET can't do.
Right, and look, your specific background that you alluded to earlier, you come from the commercial side.
Yeah.
And so I assume that sadly there are tons of devices out there that would be, incredibly medically beneficial, but they simply don't make economic sense.
That's right.
And hospitals, for better or for worse, they do run a lot of them for profits, and they have to make a return. So are these tie-ups just, where your commercial expertise, if you will, may shine?
Yeah, I think so. And this is where, from the very beginning, it was very clear to me that we needed to establish the means by which we'd be able to monetize this, et cetera. I think part of the issue when you have a new technology like this that's also a platform. So what we like to describe is this isn't, our MagSense technology isn't a one-trick pony just for breast cancer, right? So our goal is to first get in the market with a breast cancer test, because we think that's the fastest route to demonstrating proof of principle. But our goal would be very quickly to back that up with prostate cancer, ovarian cancer, and multiple types of cancer, because for the exact reason that you described, which is a hospital is going to have to make a decision. Do I invest in this new piece of capital equipment and dedicate space to it? And if so, how many different things, how many different tests can I do with that? I know what I can do with an MR machine today. I know what I can do with a PET machine today. So we'll need to be able to demonstrate that we've got a pipeline of new diagnostic tests that can be used on this MagSense technology in order for the business model to fully flush out. So the sooner we can get into the clinic, demonstrate that proof of principle, and know that we can begin to invest in second disease states like prostate cancer, ovarian cancer, or even go beyond cancer and get into other types of diseases, the sooner we can start to build that portfolio out. And of course, if we've attracted a commercial partner, they're going to be willing to, presumably, they'll be willing to invest in the development of that platform then, and those other tests, because the consumable stream is where the real money is.
Right, and they push so they really help push everything out the door, so to speak.
Exactly.
I mean, I've noticed that you're already in the University of Texas medical system, which is one of the large ones, but there's tons of them, but they do take time, effort, and energy, and that's where these partners can come into play, I assume.
Yeah, and the quick economics on it are that based on what we think the reimbursable price for our test will be.
Right.
100 instruments running only 3 tests a day is a $100 million business.
Right.
Because the math is really simple, right? Because once you get a few instruments installed on an annual basis and they're each running only 3 tests a day, you don't have to keep these instruments, this MagSense technology, busy 24/7, so to speak, in order
like
for
an MRI
these
machine. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the economics will be self-evident once we demonstrate the initial proof of principle, and because you have the locked-in consumable, it's an attractive business model to partner with. Because today you sell an MR machine, other than GE, you don't have a consumable stream that goes with that. You sell a PET machine today, but you don't sell the PET tracer because the PET tracer is made locally at the local cyclotron. So, we offer a new technology that does something that doesn't exist today, that has both the capital equipment piece and the consumable piece. And we think that will make us attractive in terms of a partnering opportunity.
Right. And can you just quickly, it's early days, but any kind of gross margin estimations for the on the reusable side?
We're pretty comfortable that the MagSense instrument itself will be able to be made and sold for about $500,000 and garner about a 40 to 50% gross margin. It's a relatively inexpensive piece of equipment to make. The added benefit is that we work in what's known as an unshielded environment. So when you install an MR, you need to shield that room from the large magnet that's there, so there's no interference. And when you put in a CT or a PET or an X-ray, you need to shield the outside world from the X-rays that are being used there, radioactivity. Our technology doesn't require that. So the cost of installation is only the capital equipment and maybe some electrical lines in that. So we save about $1 million in installation costs by not having to engineer the room.
Right.
And then the consumable, we expect to be able to sell for between $1,000 and maybe $1,500, and that should be able to have about an 80% gross margin on it. The cost of goods basis of the nanoparticle formulation itself is relatively small. So it's a high gross margin consumable, which is why I said earlier, you don't need a large number of installed instruments to be running through these to be able to generate a profitable business.
Right. Okay. And then, Bob, we'll just close this because I know we're running out of time, but just on your recent capital raise and your balance sheet, obviously the stock has done nothing but go up every day since then. It feels like it anyway. Just talk about, the kind of runway that you have from a financial point of view on your balance sheet.
Yeah, so we've got, I think at the end of that capital raise, we would have a little bit over 5 million Australian dollars in the bank. And that gives us runway all the way through this year, includes the ability to manufacture the material for the study. We may, depending on how many patients we think we might end up recruiting for the study itself, and the timing of the start of that study, we may need to raise a little bit more towards the end of the year. But right now, we've got a good cash position to help pay for the near-term activities to try to get into the clinic by the end of the year.
Right. Fantastic. Well, Bob, in closing, very exciting story, a huge addressable market, and it sounds like a breakthrough device. Really, is pretty amazing. Thank you so much for your time. You're sitting right now in a much better weather place than we are right here. It's raining in Melbourne. But hopefully, once travel restrictions ease up, we will see you soon.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the invitation. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, bye-bye.